Imagine a nation of over 7,000 islands, so strategically placed and rich in history, that for centuries it became the crown jewel every major empire and rising superpower fought to control. Why did Spain, the United States, Japan, and even modern giants like China set their sights on the Philippines? What makes this Southeast Asian archipelago so irresistible and so fiercely contested? Today, we'll uncover the 8 powerful countries that, at one time or another, wanted to control the Philippines, and why their ambitions still echo today. Quick quiz. What is the capital of the Philippines? Hint, it's a vibrant bayside city. Drop your answer in the comments below. But here's the bigger mystery. Which country holds the most sway over the Philippines today? And how did these islands become one of the world's most valuable strategic prizes? Stick with us because from ancient galleons to modern warships, the hidden battles for the Philippines might just change the way you see global power forever. Number 1. Spain. Spain was the first major power to plant its flag in the Philippines, kicking off over 3 centuries of Spanish rule. Explorer Ferdinand Magellan arrived in 1521 and met his end on Mactan Island shortly after. But it wasn't until 1565 that Spain established a permanent colony. The archipelago was named Las Islas Filipinas after King Philip II, and it quickly became a crucial Spanish outpost in Asia. Why did Spain want the Philippines? For one, its strategic location was perfect for expanding Spanish influence and commerce. It sat right on the trade routes between China and the Americas. The Manila-Acapulco galleon trade pumped Asian spices, silk, and porcelain to Europe in exchange for Mexican silver. Spain also sought to spread Catholicism. Missionaries fanned out across the islands, converting local kingdoms. For 333 years, 1565 to 1898, Spain controlled the Philippines, fending off challengers and quelling frequent local revolts. They built walled cities like Intramuros, governed through viceroys and friars, and made the Philippines the Pearl of the Orient in their empire. In short, the Spanish crown saw these islands as both a religious mission and a gateway to Asian riches, a jewel worth fighting to keep. On the lighter side, you could say Spain left an indelible cultural mark, from Hispanic surnames to 400-plus churches, and yes, a deep love for fiestas. Imagine being ruled by distant kings and friars for generations. It's no wonder many Filipinos today joke that their ancestors endured 300 years in a convent under Spain. Spain held on so long perhaps because they too fell in love with the tropical charms of the Philippines, and certainly its economic value. Who would easily let go of a land of mangoes, gold, and beautiful sunsets? But all colonial holidays end, and by the 1890s, Filipinos were yearning to break free. After centuries of forced siestas and religious sermons, an independence movement was brewing. Little did Spain know, a new rising power was about to knock on the door and push them out, setting the stage for the next contestant in this struggle. Number 2. The Netherlands. Not long after Spain established itself, the Dutch tried to muscle in on the Philippines. In the 1600s, the Netherlands was a formidable seafaring power, thanks to the Dutch East India Company, and had already seized the profitable Spice Islands to the south, today's Indonesia. To the Dutch, the Philippines looked like a tempting target to undermine their Spanish rivals and dominate Asian trade. Dutch fleets repeatedly sailed into Philippine waters in the 17th century, attempting to capture Manila or at least choke off Spanish commerce. They forged alliances with local Muslim sultanates, who resented Spanish encroachment, and launched assaults on Spanish garrisons. The most famous encounters were the battles of La Naval de Manila, 1646, where outnumbered Spanish-Filipino forces miraculously defeated the Dutch squadrons, forcing the Dutch to abandon plans to invade the Philippines altogether. Time and again, superior Dutch ships were driven back by fierce resistance and even typhoons. Ultimately, the Netherlands failed to dislodge Spain's grip on the archipelago, but not for lack of trying. Control of Manila would have been quite the prize for the Dutch Empire. In hindsight, the Dutch incursions feel like a dramatic plot that never quite changed the ending. Picture this. Dutch traders turned pirates, yelling commands in Dutch while storming tropical shores, clashing with Spanish cannons and Filipino warriors. It's almost a scene from Pirates of the Caribbean, except with more tulips and cheese on the Dutch ships. One Dutch admiral probably shrugged and said, "Not worth the trouble," as they sailed off to focus on Java and Ceylon instead. Filipinos today might not even realize how close they came to having Dutch as a third language, and probably for the best. Besides, can you imagine Filipinos wearing wooden clogs? The Dutch ultimately decided to stick to the spice trade, leaving the Spanish to their fiestas. It's a fascinating what-if moment. If those battles in 1646 had gone the other way, we might be eating stroopwafels in Manila now. But history had other plans, and Spain's rule survived the Dutch onslaught, only to face a new challenger a century later. Number 3. Great Britain. Fast forward to the 18th century, and another European giant gave it a shot. Great Britain. During the 7 Years' War, a global conflict pitting Britain against France and Spain, the British set their eyes on Manila. In 1762, a British expeditionary force attacked and occupied Manila and the nearby port of Cavite, catching the Spanish by surprise. For 18 months, the Union Jack flew over Manila. Britain's aim was to cripple Spain's Pacific trade and perhaps exchange the Philippines for other territories at the negotiating table. They looted the Spanish treasury in Manila. The British left with chests of silver and goods, and even invited the Filipino population to rise up against Spain. However, Spanish colonial officials simply fled north and kept resistance alive until the war in Europe ended. When the 7 Years' War concluded in 1763, the peace treaty forced Britain to return Manila to Spain in 1764. So the British occupation was brief, more a wartime bargaining chip than a genuine colonization. Still, the attempt showed how geopolitically significant the Philippines was. Even the world's biggest naval power couldn't resist seizing the archipelago when the opportunity arose. Had the war's outcome been different, the Philippines might have become a British colony, like Hong Kong or Malaysia. A very different trajectory indeed. The British interlude in Manila almost feels like a footnote, but an intriguing one. Imagine colonial British gentlemen in tropical suits, sipping tea in Intramuros, while bewildered locals looked on. In reality, the occupation was chaotic and violent, not quite the start of afternoon tea parties. The British likely realized that holding onto the Philippines was harder than taking it. Some British soldiers even brought Indian sepoys soldiers along, and a number of those sepoys ended up settling and marrying in the Philippines. A little unexpected legacy of the occupation. It's a bit amusing to think that Britain essentially said, "All right, we tried it, got some loot, but we're good now." Perhaps the climate didn't agree with them, or they figured they already had enough colonies to manage. India and the Philippines? Talk about imperial overtime. If you've ever wondered why Filipinos don't drive on the left side of the road or play cricket, it's because the British came and went so quickly. In the end, Britain's brief rule was like a summer thunderstorm, intense but passing. Spain was back in charge soon after, but the message was clear. The Philippines was a prize even mighty Britain was willing to snatch, if only temporarily. Number 4. United States. By the late 19th century, the age of European empires was waning, and a new power from across the ocean, the United States, arrived on the scene. In 1898, the Spanish-American War broke out, and the Philippines became one of its central theaters. After a decisive naval victory at Manila Bay, the U.S. seized the capital from Spain, with help from Filipino revolutionaries on the ground. Spain's defeat was formalized in the Treaty of Paris, 1898, where Spain ceded the Philippines to the U.S. for $20 million. The Filipino independence fighters who had long battled Spain were caught off guard. Instead of gaining freedom, their homeland was handed to a new colonial master. Determined to assert control, the United States fought the Philippine-American War, 1899 to 1902, a brutal conflict that killed tens of thousands of Filipinos who resisted American rule. Eventually, the U.S. quelled the resistance and established a colonial government. Why did America want the Philippines? In part, to have a strategic Pacific foothold, the islands are a gateway to Asia, perfect for trade with China and projecting naval power. There was also an ideological angle. Some American leaders spoke of a civilizing mission, or white man's burden, to justify taking the Philippines, ironically substituting one colonizer for another. During roughly 48 years of American rule, 1898 to 1946, the U.S. built schools, introduced the English language, and developed infrastructure, all while leveraging the Philippines as a major military outpost. American bases in the Philippines later became pivotal in World War II and the Cold War, cementing U.S. strategic interest in controlling, or at least strongly influencing, the country for decades. The U.S. involvement in the Philippines is a classic case of "we come as liberators, and then stay as colonizers." It's a chapter filled with both cooperation and conflict. On the lighter side, American rule left Filipinos with a fondness for basketball, Hollywood films, and burgers. Quite the cultural imprint. Ever wonder why Manila has a Jollibee on every corner selling burgers and fried chicken? That's American influence, local style. There's a famous quip that after 50 years of Hollywood, many Filipinos spoke English and knew Frank Sinatra tunes by heart. Yet the Filipino sentiment was far from entirely rosy. They hadn't forgotten that promise of independence was delayed until 1946. It's almost as if the Philippines was the U.S.'s test run at being a world power, an American adventure in empire. And boy, was it complicated. One moment, Filipino and U.S. soldiers were brothers in arms fighting the Japanese, and the next, Philippine senators were voting to kick out U.S. bases in 1991. The love-hate relationship endures to this day. America wanted the Philippines for strategic might, and in many ways still does, through military alliances and aid. But Filipinos today are proud of steering their own ship. As we'll see, though, letting go of a former colony in such a vital spot isn't easy. The shadow of the stars and stripes in Philippine affairs is long indeed. Number 5. Germany. While the United States ultimately claimed the Philippines after 1898, they weren't the only ones eyeing the archipelago at that time. Germany, under Kaiser Wilhelm II, was a rising imperial power in the late 19th century and had a serious case of colony envy. Germany had relatively few colonies and was eager to catch up with other European empires. The Philippines, freshly shaken loose from Spain in 1898, looked like a golden opportunity. In fact, during the Spanish-American War, a German naval squadron showed up in Manila Bay uninvited, hovering menacingly as the Spanish and Americans fought. The Germans were ostensibly there to protect their nationals and interests in Manila, but history suggests they had ulterior motives. Kaiser Wilhelm secretly hoped that if the U.S. decided not to take the Philippines, Germany could swoop in and seize the islands for itself. This led to some tense standoffs with U.S. Admiral George Dewey, who saw the German fleets maneuvering as hostile. Ultimately, the American decision to annex the Philippines was partly driven by the fear that if they didn't, another power like Germany, or Japan, would. Thwarted in the Philippines, Germany instead purchased other Pacific islands from Spain, like the Carolines and Marianas, in 1899, crumbs from the Spanish Empire's collapse. So while Germany never got to plant the black, red, and white flag over Manila, it certainly wanted to. The episode underscores how coveted the Philippines was. Even a newcomer like Germany was ready to risk conflict to control it. It's almost a forgotten what-if of history. Imagine the Philippines speaking German or German-built beer gardens in Manila. It sounds far-fetched, but it could have happened had events zigged instead of zagged. The Germans were literally late to the party. By the time they tried to cut in, Uncle Sam had already danced off with the prize. One can picture Kaiser Wilhelm sulking that he missed out on these beautiful islands. There's even an anecdote that a German prince toured Mindanao in the 1880s, scouting economic potential. They were serious about their interest. In a humorous light, perhaps it's fortunate for Filipino cuisine that Germany didn't colonize them. Otherwise, sauerbraten might have replaced adobo. And can you picture jeepneys, those famous Filipino minibuses, with Bavarian decorations? The clash of cultures would have been wild. In the end, Germany's ambitions were foiled, and they had to be content with colonies in Africa and the Central Pacific. The Philippines slipped through their fingers, proving that in the game of empire, even the big guys don't always get what they want. For the Philippines, it was one less foreign master to endure, at least until the next one came along. Number 7. Russia, Soviet Union. Unlike the others, Russia, or more accurately the Soviet Union during the Cold War, never colonized the Philippines, but it certainly had designs on influencing it. After the Philippines gained independence in 1946, it immediately became a close ally of the United States, especially with those big American military bases on its soil. To the Soviet Union, this was a strategic obstacle. The Philippines was effectively a U.S. unsinkable aircraft carrier in Asia, projecting American power. Soviet interest in controlling the Philippines was about pulling it out of the Western orbit. Throughout the Cold War, 1950s to 1980s, the Soviets supported communist movements worldwide, and the Philippines was no exception. They covertly sympathized with or aided local communist insurgencies, like the Huk Rebellion post-WWCR and later the New People's Army, hoping a friendly communist government might one day rise in Manila. However, their influence was limited. The Philippine government strongly suppressed communist rebels, and the U.S. provided ample support to Manila to keep it that way. It wasn't until 1976 that the Philippines even established diplomatic ties with the USSR, as then-President Marcos pursued a slight opening. Moscow did make some economic overtures and propaganda efforts, but during the Cold War, it never got a foothold. In recent years, modern Russia has tried to rekindle a relationship. Under President Duterte, 2016 to 2022, the Philippines warmed slightly to Russia. Joint military drills were considered, and Russia offered arms sales, rifles, helicopters, even talk of submarines. While not a traditional power trying to control, Russia's interest is clear. It would love to have the Philippines as a strategic partner, or at least pry it away from being a staunch U.S. ally, thus extending Russian influence into Southeast Asia. Russia's courtship of the Philippines sometimes feels like a distant admirer sending letters, persistent but from far away. There's even a bit of comedy in how Russia has tried to win friends, gifting attack helicopters and Kalashnikovs as tokens of goodwill, as if saying, "Do svidaniya, old alliances. How about a new friend?" For Filipinos, who have long been used to American and Asian influences, seeing Russian Navy ships dock in Manila was a novel sight, in recent years, cue the Matryoshka dolls and Putin photo ops. The cultural gap is wide. Balut meat borscht, anyone? And while Filipino jeepneys haven't been replaced by Russian Ladas, the idea of Russia as a partner has gained some traction in certain circles, especially when the Philippines has had spats with the West. Still, many Filipinos remain skeptical memories of the Soviet era, and a general wariness of being caught between superpowers linger. So, has Russia controlled the Philippines? Not at all. But it certainly casts a long shadow and waves hello from time to time, hoping maybe someday Manila might wave back more enthusiastically. As one veteran Filipino diplomat quipped, "We've danced with the Russian bear, but we're not ready to go steady." In the grand geopolitical dance, Russia's turn on the floor with the Philippines has been cautious and limited, at least so far. Number 8. Malaysia. Sometimes the threat, or allure, isn't from a far-flung empire, but from the country next door. Enter Malaysia, the Philippines' southwestern neighbor. While Malaysia has never invaded the Philippines, the two have a long-standing dispute that amounts to a tug-of-war over territory and influence. The flashpoint is Sabah, a resource-rich province on the island of Borneo. Historically, Sabah was linked to the Sultanate of Sulu, based in what is now the southern Philippines, and by a quirk of colonial history, ended up as part of Malaysia in 963. The Philippines, however, has maintained a territorial claim on Sabah for decades, arguing it rightfully belonged to the heirs of the Sulu Sultan and thus to the Philippines. This claim has been a thorn in Malaysia's side, as Sabah is now an integral Malaysian state. Malaysia, naturally, wants to secure its hold on Sabah and prevent any Philippine assertion from gaining traction. This led to bouts of tension, such as in the 1960s when the Philippines, under President Marcos, allegedly trained a secret force to infiltrate Sabah, a plan that collapsed in the infamous Jabida massacre incident. Beyond Sabah, Malaysia and the Philippines also have overlapping claims in the Spratly Islands in the South China Sea, and both keep an eye on each other's moves in those disputed waters. Moreover, Malaysia has tried to influence the peace process in the southern Philippines, acting as a mediator in negotiations with Muslim rebel groups, partly to ensure stability on its own border. In essence, Malaysia's interest has been in containing any Philippine claim or instability that could threaten Malaysian territory. It's not colonization, but it is a form of control, shaping outcomes to favor Malaysia's national interests. If you found this journey through Philippine history and geopolitics fascinating, remember that this is just one part of a much bigger global puzzle. Who do you think will have the biggest influence on the Philippines in the next decade? The debate is heating up, and we'd love to see your thoughts in the comments. Meanwhile, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Discovering the Earth for more deep dives into the world's most intriguing places and stories. We've got plenty more adventures coming, from untold histories to geopolitical mysteries. The saga of the Philippines teaches us that even a smaller nation can shape and be shaped by giants. And there's always more to discover on this Earth. Stay curious, stay adventurous, and we'll see you in the next video.